Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you guys so much for joining me for the video today. And what I wanted to do is look at which quarterbacks are primed for regression in 2022. Now, let me be clear. It does not mean that these guys are going to absolutely suck this year. It just means I believe that they're going to take a step back after what they did last season. But before we get into that, if you guys are new to the channel, welcome. Please consider giving me a like and subscribe. I cannot thank you enough for the support. It means so very much and it helps me out a ton. With that said, let's get into this version of Hot Off the Press. I do have 7 total quarterbacks that I am going to be covering. The first 2 are honorable mentions, people that did not make my top 5 list. Now, when I get to those 5 quarterbacks, they are not in any particular order. These are just 5 quarterbacks that I think are set to regress in 2022. So let's start with those honorable mentions. And the first one I have is Kirk Cousins. Now, he's been putting up big numbers for a while now, and 2021 was no different, as he had one of the best touchdown to interception ratios in the entire league, 33 scores and just 7 picks. He's also made it 3 straight years with a QB rating of over 103, and that is something that Brady, Mahomes, and Rodgers have all failed to do, and yes, that is real. It might be too much to ask for another statistically excellent season. However, with all of the changes that the Vikings have in this offense, with an entirely new coaching staff, I am expecting, and really I'm hoping, the moves here are significant. Head coach Kevin O'Connell likely opens up the playbook with new offensive coordinator Wes Phillips, and it would not be surprising to have a slow start to the year for Minnesota as they adapt. Now, Cousins misses the list because not only am I a fan of the change, and I think it is for the better, but because Cousins also gets breakout tight end in the making Irv Smith Jr. back from injury. Smith will add another layer to this offense, and he gives the Vikings an additional weapon for the defense to have to worry about. And even though replicating the numbers that he posted last year are going to be tough, I believe that Captain Kirk has the support to do just that. Now to my second and final honorable mention, and it is Matthew Stafford. I do suppose that regression is almost inevitable after you win the Super Bowl, especially when you consider just how high this bar has been set. A step down is not exactly a genius call. But I believe that Stafford and his surroundings are good enough to bypass that letdown. Losing Odell Beckham and Robert Woods certainly hurts, but Stafford never had either of them on the field together anyways, and the addition of Allen Robinson II offsets that blow. Sure, they do have a new offensive coordinator in Liam Cohn, but McVay is still going to be calling the shots on offense with his giant brain. And Cam Akers is going to be a full year removed from his Achilles injury as well. The Rams are going to be just fine, and Stafford should not only avoid going backwards, but he could move that bar up even higher. Now to my 5 quarterbacks who I believe are going to regress in 2022, and we're going to start with Tom Brady. And no, betting against the GOAT is not something that I want to make a habit of. Thank you. But I also have to look at what is most likely to happen. 2021 was another epic year for Brady, and really, he should have been the MVP. He threw for 1,200 yards more and 6 more touchdowns than Aaron Rodgers, and he won the same amount of games. Anyways, Brady is 44 years old, and he's gonna be 45 by the time the season starts. I know that he's not human, I get that, but Kale can only get you so far. I know, he did not lose anyone. In fact, he gained a really good number 3 in Russell Gage. It's just that eventually that drop off is happening, and regression from last season still means that he's going to be putting up all pro numbers. The Bucs would be wise to ease up a little bit after Brady threw it a ridiculous 719 times in 2021. Now that was 82 times more than his previous high. Now those 637 attempts came almost a decade ago on top of it. I believe Tampa Bay does just that. Keyshawn Vaughn emerged just a little bit, and playoff Lenny is going to see plenty of work in a more focused rushing attack for the Bucs. I do still think that Tampa Bay is going to sling it, but Brady is going to be closer to 5,000 yards and 37 touchdowns than to the insane numbers that he accomplished last year. My next quarterback is Aaron Rodgers. Now this one does feel like a layup, but hey, we take those. The joke is on Green Bay as they still refuse to draft a wide receiver in the first round for whatever reason. They did know that this was a historically deep wide receiver draft, and they had not one, but 2 picks in the first round, right? Yeah, maybe, probably not. Had Minnesota not been kind enough to rob them of their 53rd and 59th pick, they probably still do not draft a wide receiver. Now, Christian Watson is an excellent fit, and kudos to the Packers for finally pulling the trigger on the position. But there is a reason that he was the 7th wide receiver drafted. An elite option, he was not. This leaves the Packers with one of the worst groups of wide receivers in the entire league. It is headlined by Sammy Watkins, Allen Lazard, and Randall Cobb. Yeah, that's it. That's the list. I know that Rodgers is magic. I've watched it for 14 years now. But that lack of talent is going to catch up with Green Bay, whether they want to believe it and accept it or not. The Packers are going to be forced to lean very heavily on that running game, and with Davante Adams gone and no one but the misfits to throw to, it seems extremely unlikely that A-Rod hits his 2021 numbers. On to my next quarterback on the list, and it is Patrick Mahomes. And at this point, I am really asking for it. Regression for Brady, Rodgers, and now Mahomes? Yeah, I'm a glutton for punishment. Much of what I said about Rodgers applies here to Patrick. The wide receiver core is fairly thin after the Chiefs traded away Tyreek Hill. Now, in their defense, they did sign Juju Smith-Schuster, which I do love, and they took Marquez Valdes-Scantling from Green Bay in free agency as well. Now, Sky Moore was a steal, I think, at the 54th pick, but he was the 13th wide receiver drafted, and I think that tells you a lot about what other teams thought of him. While he should fit in pretty well and see a bunch of targets, what KC actually gets out of him is anyone's guess. The Chiefs did not go out and sign Ronald Jones II for no reason, and I believe that a more focused ground game attack could be in the works. Last year, we saw signs of faltering from Mahomes early on in the year before he lit it up and made us forget about it. Now, without Hill to pull coverage, things are going to be a lot harder on him. Mahomes is not going to fall off a cliff by any means, but 4,500 yards and 35 touchdowns seems more realistic for him in 2022. The next quarterback I believe is due for some regression is going to be Carson Wentz, and finally, a quarterback that is not going to get me in hot water. Now, Wentz had a fairly successful 2021 season, but he certainly did not light it up, and he crumbled as the season wore on. There was only so much that Jonathan Taylor could do. Now in Washington, who gave up an arm and a leg to get him, at least relative to his value, Wentz is hoping for another fresh start. I do not see things going particularly well for him. While the offensive line is still going to be really good, it is not what it was in Indianapolis. And he may have a great backfield, but Antonio Gibson and J.D. McKissick cannot hope to replicate the greatness of Taylor either. Those were two things that Wentz relied heavily on, and I believe it hurts him to lose both of them. At wide receiver, he does have an upgrade in Terry McLaurin, and the Commanders also helped him out by selecting Jahan Dotson out of Penn State at number 16. So that is something. But overall, what Wentz has around him has gotten worse, and I expect a few more picks as he struggles to adapt. He could push for 3,500 yards again, but it also could be difficult for him to get over that 25 touchdown hump, and it could be a long year in Washington. I have one more quarterback for you before we bid farewell, and it is Dak Prescott, who had a monster year for Dallas in 2021. He threw for 7 more touchdowns than he ever had while keeping his INT total respectable. Even with Dallas shifting more towards that running game than I anticipated, Dak stuffed the stat sheets. So why the backpedal in 2022? For me, it is pretty simple. The loss of Amari Cooper, for peanuts no less, hurts this offensive passing attack. That's not to say that the Cowboys do not have other weapons. CeeDee Lamb is a stud, and he is going to have a career year. You can book it. If Michael Gallup can stay healthy, he likely elevates his game as well. And Dalton Schultz basically came out of nowhere to cement his place as a top 10 tight end in the league. There are still weapons here. Dallas is the best team in the NFC East, but that gap is closing fast, and Dak has not exactly excelled against top competition. Make sure you check out my Cowboys video on if they can win the NFC East. I deep dive the Cowboys and this Dak situation as well. Now, I just have a feeling that the offense in Dallas relies heavily on that 1-2 combo of Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard, and the numbers that Dak put up last year are going to be hard to replicate because of it. And we will wrap it up with that. Thank you guys for joining me for the video today. I hope you learned something. If you're new to the channel, if you haven't done it yet, or if you enjoyed the content, please consider giving me a like and subscribe. I cannot thank you guys enough for all of your support. It helps me out a ton, and it means so much to me. This is Relentless Press. I am your host, Abraham Opatz, and we'll see you next time.